So welcome, our beloved, brilliant colleague Anouk. We so appreciate your consistent solidarity, leadership, and yeah, just love, genuine love and authenticity that you show us consistently. You've shown up for Setsi, you've shown up for me. And since the day I've met you, it's just been a remarkable relationship. So I so appreciate you. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by acknowledging, giving thanks to our creator. We acknowledge the original stewards, the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Nook, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Thank you, Victor. Well, it's an honor to be here with you and to share this conversation. My name is Anouk Bertner, and I'm the Executive Director at Future of Good. Future of Good is a media and learning organization, and our purpose is to support the social purpose world in doing our work better and doing our work smarter. So we do that through journalism. We do a lot of solutions journalism, so it's not meant to be, gotcha news bites. It's really meant to be deep, thoughtful, nuanced reporting that just doesn't show up in the mainstream. We have learning products, so we have summits, we have events that we do. We work with Foundation for Black Communities on the Black Leadership and Social Impact Summit. We are launching a well-being summit this year, and we also are the host of the Social Finance Forum in Canada.
That's incredible. The journey of Future of Good is truly remarkable, and I'm just so excited in your new role. I saw it and it literally made my day. So congratulations. Yeah. And I appreciate your leadership as always. So my next question, what's inspiring you right now in your work? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
That's a big question. I think the thing for me that is really inspiring is when people want to engage authentically. I think it's so easy to get caught in our silos of this is how I see the world and this is how, the people around me see the world. And I think the thing I love about Future of Good is we get deep into the details, we get into the nuance, and we get into the storytelling. And I'm sure you've seen this amazing TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story. And I have, it's my favorite TED Talk of all time. And I think it's so important for us to have multiple stories. And those multiple stories let us see the world in a multitude of different ways. I used to work at a place called Eco Equitable here in Ottawa, where we would support newcomer women in learning to sew so that they would decrease their social isolation and also so that they could enter the labor market. And it was so fascinating because everything that I thought about newcomers, everything that I thought about refugees, everything that I thought about multi-barriered women was just cracked open every day. And some of it was really hard. Some of it was really great, but it adds nuance. And I think that's the thing that we really miss right now in our media landscape is nuance, is really taking the time to get to know someone and knowing that stories are complicated and there aren't a lot of easy solutions. So I'd say that's the part that's inspiring for me. The part that really frustrates me, and I see this a lot in the social purpose world, is people who get into their monologues. And I heard somewhere that you can't actually have a conversation or a dialogue with someone unless you're willing to change your own mind. So you have to enter into dialogue with this expectation that I might learn something new and I might change my mind, and I'm okay with that. And I feel like the folks that I see engaging online are not doing that. They're not open to having their own minds changed. They want to change everybody else's minds. And I think that's really dangerous. And I don't know how we get around that. Like, I think that's that's the thing that definitely keeps me up at night.
I couldn't agree more. It's a scary time to live in terms of depolarization and the fact that folks are so embedded in their own self stories and not recognizing the multitude of stories, but most importantly, just a lack of grace, mercy, compassion, empathy that's required to actually be a human. So I couldn't agree more. So my next question, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and your team working to overcome these challenges?
Hmm. I think we have a lot of challenges that are, that everybody has. I think, we struggle, to make ends meet, to do all the operational things of, cash flow and making sure there's enough money in the bank to pay everyone. I think wellness and well-being is a huge topic right now, and I feel like every employer is dealing with this. Like, how do we as employers, and how do we as a social impact sector take care of our employees? And what does that mean? Like, where is sort of like the boundary of our responsibility? Because I think the world, like, we're in a time of reckoning where there's a lot of trauma that is bubbling up, and that is really real trauma. And there's a part of it that an employer needs to support their employees in. But then there's just global trauma too. And I don't know what the role of the employer is in that. And I think it's, like, we're all employers are navigating it. So, there's a lot of talk in the DEI world of, bring your full self to work. But what does that mean? Like, what if your full self isn't welcome at work? Or what if your employer is not set up to deal with whatever that full self means? So I think, trying to find a way to walk the talk and not just have these empty platitudes is really hard. And I don't think, I think that's part of why DEI work is struggling right now, because I think there's a lot of organizations that love the idea of it and like brought on these concepts and they're like, this is amazing and we want people to feel really comfortable here. And then once employees started asking hard questions, start wondering whether workplaces are actually set up to do this. So some of them will be set up to do it and they will do it really well. Other ones will fail. And it's going to be really fascinating to watch.
I couldn't agree more. And especially around the DEI piece, this DEI pushback is so odd to me because the sector and the ecosystem that I belong to is past that. We're at justice, access, inclusion,
Yes.
diversity, decolonization, and equity. Like DEI is a word that's so old in terms of where the conversation has gone to. And in terms of the mental well-being piece, I couldn't agree more. Like one of our colleagues runs a large charitable organization, and they were actually punished by two funders for going to a 4-day work week. Like, can you imagine? And this
Wow.
and they actually had to just turn down the resources because the funders said, listen, we don't prescribe to that, and if you don't change, so there's a lot of work to be done around the traumas that folks are facing within workplaces, the generational cures that we're all trying to be within our own bloodline. And I'll do a plug for my brilliant colleague, Sarah Juma, who built out a project called BEMI years ago, the Black Entrepreneurship Mental Health Initiative. And it was a remarkable initiative because what it did was it paired Black entrepreneurs across the country during COVID with clinicians, psychotherapists, psychologists for I think 3 or 5 free sessions. And it exploded and it showed the need for this type of work and connection. And I feel like that type of work is needed in the social impact space more than ever because folks are so stretched and sometimes exhausted in this work. So once again, I appreciate your leadership and your candor. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
So I've actually become really obsessed with this book, Traction, which I happen to have here because I'm using it all the time. And it's been super, super helpful for aligning our priorities. And the thinking behind it is that a lot of us, so it's meant for entrepreneurs, but it can be applied in the social impact world. And the idea is that a lot of us are working really hard, but we're spinning our wheels. So how do we get actual traction on our goals? So I had an amazing conversation with St. Elizabeth Health. I don't know if you know them out of Toronto. They're just a phenomenal organization. So they were founded by a group of Catholic nuns, and one of their central tenets is no margin, no mission. And I found that so fascinating that 113 years ago, this group of nuns who created, the genesis of what this group would be, had the foresight to see that if you don't have the resources, you cannot actually serve your mission. So it's forced me to get really operationally focused and really financially focused. So not in a way that is in service to capitalism for the sake of capitalism, but is in service to stability, so that I can spend my time and energy taking care of the folks who work for a future of good, in our ecosystem, and really work on excellent programs and excellent goals. And I think that's really important. I think our sector really struggles with the money piece. Like, we're very uncomfortable talking about money. We're uncomfortable advocating for ourselves around money and having sophisticated conversations around money. And part of that is because we don't have the training. Like, there's very few people with business degrees, MBAs, or the experience. And then it just makes us feel kind of gross, where we're just like, well, why would I talk about the money when, you know, we do frontline support, or, you know, I'm seeing someone with a mental health crisis. But it's interesting because, you know, I asked my staff, you know, what is the number one issue around well-being? Like, how can your workplace create well-being for you? And the number one thing that came back was pay people well. You know, it comes to wages. So yes, people want to do meaningful work, and they want to be respected, and they want to feel like they belong. But at the end of the day, if they are stressed about money every single day, like, that is not a well workplace. And so anyways, I feel like the whole social impact world really needs to heal our relationship with money, and treat it like a tool. And yeah, just get smarter about how we use it.
That sounds like a panel for an upcoming forum. Well, no, that's a brilliant sentiment. I couldn't agree more. One of my colleagues in the States, Edgar, he runs Decolonizing Wealth, and he talks about money as a form of medicine. And definitely, I think that we all have, in some instances, some trauma or healing work to do around money. And then obviously there's folks on the far right and far left of the spectrum around this work. But SC Health is an incredible organization, and that model around no margin, no mission, I think, is a call to action to a lot of organizations around sustainability and what true social impact should look like. Because you can't do the work if you're not resourced. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. And who's the author of Traction, if you don't mind, for the listeners and viewers?
It's Gino Wickman.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your look. So my next question is, how do you feel about the future of social impact in Canada?
I feel really positive about it. I feel like there are so many people who are doing really good things, and who are incredibly authentic about it. And you know, work incredibly hard. I think, you know, I've always had this philosophy that I think the charitable and nonprofit sector has enough money. I don't think our issue is resources. I think it's the way that we allocate them. And I think we need to get smarter about how we allocate them. And I don't have, you know, I'm kind of solutions agnostic on this. I don't have, you know, a specific way that I would do this. But I can tell you it's really fascinating. So I'm in Ottawa, and you know, I work out of the Impact Hub, and I can tell you it is fascinating how in downtown Ottawa there are so many buildings that are partially or fully empty. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, as leases come up, there is just going to be this total sea change of what is going on. And I've heard that this is the same across other cities. As you probably know, WeWork, which is a co-working space, has gone bankrupt, probably because of some financial model pieces, but also because people weren't showing up, you know, to work in these spaces. And I think there's a bit of a, you know, there's a reflection there of the nonprofit and charity space. Like, where is their capacity that's not being used? And I think we need that sea change of, like, really looking at ourselves through a very hard reflective lens, and making those changes. Because it, you know, I find it just really, really heartbreaking that we live in such a wealthy country, and we have people who are food insecure, we have people who are housing insecure. You know, we have a lot of folks who are struggling with the basics when there are empty buildings across all of our downtowns that are being heated and cooled year round, that are being staffed, and are empty. We have grocery stores that are throwing away food. So, there's something really off there. And it needs to be addressed in a very dramatic way.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for your candor as always. I had a remarkable conversation with my colleague, Sharon Avery, the CEO of Toronto Community Foundations. And she said something that was so beautiful and resonated. She said, we don't just need good neighborhoods, we need good neighbors. And that's what you're talking about, being a good neighbor. Like, as opposed to
Yeah.
throwing away the food, how can you create an initiative to solve a social problem? As opposed to having all this empty space, how can you create a solution to solve a problem? And these pervasive problems can be solved. It's not a how. Like, we know how to solve these problems. So who and a where? Who are the thought leaders and practitioners that can deploy innovation and impact, and where are the communities of practice, or the models that can be replicated or scaled? So I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much once again for sharing those insights. So this is my second last question. What is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
I think the goal in a lot of nonprofit or charity work is to not be needed anymore. I think there's a lot of issues in the social impact, philanthropy, fundee world. And it would be nice to be in a position where we didn't need food banks and we don't need shelters. And this work sort of evaporates in some way. And I don't know if that is realistic. I don't think there's any nation on earth that has totally eradicated the need for it. But I think maybe a more respectful relationship. One of the things that's always bothered me about the social impact world is how there's sort of this societal judgment of looking down on charities, of, oh, these folks, they should run themselves like a business and they don't know what they're doing. And, if they were just more professional or more effective, then, things would be better. And I feel like it is such a disrespectful perspective, because charities exist to basically, they are subcontracted by the government and by Canadian citizens to deal with all of our problems. Homelessness is a societal problem. Mental health supports are a societal problem. Like, these are not things that charities are excited to service. We do it because it needs to be done and we care about our neighbors. But I think a more respectful relationship in that way would be lovely. Like, I think that's maybe a realistic goal. And I think, and I think that also, like, a rebalancing of the relationship between funders and fundees. I think funders do really important work, but they need to engage with their fundees in equal footing with more equity and more respect.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that. One of my colleagues, Peter, is always saying that the nonprofit sector, especially in Ontario, is not respected when it's past automotive in terms of employees. Like, and the fact that there's nonprofits that have over 450 staff. We were just talking about one before this call. So and they're 40 years old. So they have to make payroll for 450 staff for 40 years. Like, if that's not a well-established, mature framework and model, I don't know what is. So definitely that paternalistic and prescriptive model of, the nonprofit sector or charitable sector, I think is very troublesome. I remember recently reading an article that our colleague Bruce McDonald put up, a post that's alluded to some of these sentiments as well. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you for your candor. I appreciate you. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
So I'm going to say something really dorky, and I hope at least a couple people actually do this. Have coffee or a meal with someone you deeply disagree with. I think this is the biggest thing that any of us can do, which is honestly really hard. I think having conversations with people who we respect or who are like us is so easy. And then it just sort of reinforces who we are. Every single time I have had a meaningful interaction with someone who is different from me, it gave me so much more than you know, what I gave to them. And it's actually one of the things I miss about working at Eco Equitable, because it kept me so grounded. When you're constantly around people who are, you know, in domestic violence situations, who are food insecure, who are dealing with housing insecurity, it keeps you humble and it just keeps you so incredibly grateful. And without that, it's just so easy to think about what you don't have rather than what you do. And so I think, you know, spending some meaningful time with someone who is not like you is phenomenal. And I haven't done this in a long time either. So I think maybe it's a call to action for myself also, like to reinvigorate that part of my life. But I would say that's one of the most effective ways to be a good neighbor.
That's a beautiful sentiment and a beautiful call to action. I think probably my favorites, and we've done almost 300 interviews. Yeah, I think that's my favorite call to action in the history of this community. Yeah, that's remarkable. Well, in this world of depolarization, those are the things, those are the muscles that we need to stretch. So thank you for that, and as well, just thank you for all that you do, all that you represent. Yeah, you do a lot for so many, and I really want to make sure you get your flowers while you're here to receive them. So I appreciate you, family. And as always at Setsi, we close this conversation the way we began, by giving thanks and acknowledging our creator, by giving thanks and acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, fam. I appreciate you.
Thank you.